Hello everyone, and welcome to the second versus battle on the channel. I've had a particular interest in this one for a while now. Two basically legendary ninja in the world of Naruto at their prime, Nagato Uzumaki and Itachi Uchiha. Before we start, I want to quickly outline the conditions of the fight. 1. Both characters are completely bloodlusted. Itachi just attacked the Rain Village and Nagato just murdered Sasuke. So both characters are not hesitating and are going straight for the kill. 2. Both characters are in their hypothetical prime, so we will be using an Itachi who doesn't have the illness and isn't almost blind, but he is alive, and not an Edo Tensei like we saw in the war. Same goes for Nagato. Healthy body, no Edo Tensei. 3. Both characters will be going into the fight armed with the knowledge that they have on each other in the series. So Nagato knows about Itachi's Genjutsu, Amaterasu, and Susanoo, and Itachi knows about Shinra Tensei, Chibaku Tensei, Soul Absorption, Ninjutsu Absorption, and the Shared Vision. Basically, everything that they have seen each other do in the series, they know. The way this will work is I will break down each of the characters' physical feats and compare them to each other, and then do the same with their special abilities and techniques. And then I will give you my conclusion on who I think the winner would be. So, without any further ado, let's just jump straight into it. So, first of all, speed. Itachi's most notable speed feats are keeping up with KCM1 Naruto and keeping up with Sage Kabuto and EMS Sasuke. The first one of these is a bit complicated as people usually use this to wank Itachi to being much faster than the Raikage, but you have to realize some things that really bring this feat down a bit. First, Naruto had to push himself to the absolute limit to blitz the Raikage, but he was only fighting Itachi very casually. In fact, they were having a normal conversation in the middle of the fight. Granted, this is still impressive, but not nearly as much as people believe. And Swakage already talked about this in the Itachi versus the 5 Kage video, so I suggest you check that out if you want a more detailed explanation on that. Nagato, on the other hand, just absolutely blitzes and doo-doos all over KCM1 Naruto and Killer Bee, both of whom are rivaling the Raikage in terms of speed. He effortlessly reacts to all of their attacks and counters accordingly without any hint of feeling pressured or nervous. A better way to scale Itachi to KCM levels of speed is with Kabuto and Sasuke. So Itachi did better in that fight than Sasuke, so we can reasonably assume that Itachi's speed should be on par with or greater than EMS Sasuke's. But this is where a problem arises. EMS Sasuke in the battle with Itachi and Kabuto might not have actually been as strong as the Sasuke that fought alongside KCM 1.5 Naruto in the war. And here is why. In the world of Naruto, and in the series, in the manga, in everything, there are mental amps. So, for example, Naruto fought against Neji in the Chunin exams and just barely won that fight, and then later he bodied Gaara, who is way stronger than Neji, just because he had a mental amp and wanted to protect his friends. Similarly, with the Final Valley fight, he also got mental amps there. And there are numerous examples where people just get their act together, like they doubt themselves, they're like losing the fight, but then they pull themselves together and they pull out the victory. That happens quite a bit in the series itself. And it's basically a fact that those mental amps do happen. And in the Kabuto fight, Sasuke was full of doubts. He doubted about Itachi, he doubted about the truth, he wasn't sure about anything at that point. He just wanted to speak to Itachi. And later, when he speaks to Itachi and he does hear everything from his brother's mouth, and he definitely pulls himself together after that, and he definitely gets a mental amp from that. So we can't exactly judge how strong Itachi is based on this alone. And another problem is that most people assume that EMS Sasuke and KCM 1.5 Naruto are equal, and KCM 1.5 Naruto should be much faster than KCM 1 Naruto. This happens because Sasuke was confident that he could fight alongside Naruto and never made any comments on Naruto's strength, and they both did about the same against the mini Jubi clones and later Jubito. The problem with that is that EMS Sasuke has no direct scaling to KCM 1.5 Naruto. The only thing that we know for sure is that Sasuke is weaker and presumably slower than KCM 2 Naruto, since he was shocked when Naruto went into KCM 2 and even had an internal monologue about how strong Naruto was. The problem with the mini Jubi fight is that the Jubi clones were way weaker than Naruto, Sasuke, and even their summonings. And then later, when they fought Jubito, Jubito was way stronger than the both of them. So, to give you an example of why this is important, let's say that there is a tiger and a house cat. Both of them had to fight a mouse. Obviously, both of them would stomp the mouse. Now, imagine that both of them had to fight King Kong. Obviously, they both get stomped. That doesn't mean that they are equal. I'm not saying that the difference between Sasuke and Naruto's power is as large as the difference between a cat and a tiger's power or something, or that the power gap is even necessarily there, but it's still worth keeping in mind that just because both characters did about the same against an opponent who is either much weaker or much stronger than them, that doesn't make them relative to each other. It can be implied that Naruto and Sasuke were equals at this point, lore-wise though, and it's still definitely debatable on how fast these characters actually were. So overall, Itachi is above a Sasuke who is weaker than the Sasuke that was vaguely in the same league as KCM 1.5 Naruto, who is faster than KCM 1 Naruto, and Nagato is much faster than KCM 1 Naruto and Killer Bee. So overall, in terms of speed, Nagato and Itachi should be somewhat relative. In terms of physical movement speed and reaction speed, I definitely think that Nagato would have the upper hand, but Itachi's Sharingan would help him react and keep up with Nagato's attacks. So I think that they could be considered in the same league when it comes to speed. Also, let me quickly address one more thing. Edo Tensei. Both Nagato and Itachi were Edo Tensei in the war, but in my humble opinion, only one of them was nerfed. The other one was actually buffed. Only the people who were already ridiculously physically strong were nerfed. People like Madara, Hashirama, and Tobirama come to mind. But people like Zabuza and Haku were just as strong as their alive versions, and some people got way stronger. The third Hokage had trouble keeping up with an Orochimaru when he was alive, but then he could rescue Naruto faster than Tobirama could, Tobirama being the person who scared Orochimaru just by flexing his chakra a little bit. And Hiruzen was also single-handedly holding off Guru Guru Yamato, who was also taking on the whole Shinobi Alliance. Another example is how Kimimaro was struggling against Kid Gaara when he was alive, but could somewhat fight a KCM-1 Naruto clone in the war. So what I'm getting at is that alive Itachi could be slightly physically stronger than his Edo Tensei counterpart, but he would have way less chakra and stamina. Meanwhile, Nagato, who is a very physical fighter and who is definitely above Tobirama in terms of raw power, would definitely be weaker as an Edo Tensei, meaning that alive Nagato should be stronger, faster, and more durable than Edo Nagato. So, even in terms of speed, I would give it to Nagato, pretty much definitively. Power, however, is a lot more definitive. There is nothing in Itachi's arsenal that even comes close to the chaotic Shinra Tensei or Chibaku Tensei. In terms of raw power, Itachi just cannot match Nagato, plain and simple. Durability is another thing that we have to discuss, though it will not be as important as everything else since both fighters have ways to one-shot each other. Itachi has the Totsuka Blade and Tsukuyomi, while Nagato has the Human Path and Chibaku Tensei. So the only part where durability would really matter is if, say, Itachi gets hit with a Shinra Tensei. Then we would have to determine how much damage it would do to him. So I'll say this. Base Itachi's durability is not that great. as he was injured by Sasuke with a rigged shuriken. And some people will say that he was holding back in that fight and he was sick and all that. But I can't see how either of these would decrease his physical durability. The only thing that you could possibly argue is that the people in Naruto basically use chakra as a shield almost, maybe. And they enhance themselves with the chakra, so maybe Itachi just like retreated the chakra from the part of the leg that would have been hit by the shuriken, and that's why he got injured. But that seems like quite a bit of mental gymnastics, and it's not what is implied, I believe. On the other hand, we have Kisame, a mostly physical fighter who is consistently compared to a tailed beast, getting his chest blown open by a lariat from Killer Bee, and here is Nagato tanking it, absorbing Bee's chakra, launching Bee off of himself with 0 damage sustained while crippled. So, in terms of physical body durability, Nagato has the clear upper hand. Although, like I said, it's not going to matter too much in this fight. And also, another thing is that if Itachi does get hit head on by a full power Shinra Tensei, he's dead. Like, he dies immediately. So, why? Well, first of all, Pain just did a lot of crazy stuff with Shinra Tensei. He obviously blew up the whole Leaf Village, but that was chaotic Shinra Tensei, and that has a large cooldown and stuff, so maybe Nagato would be hesitant to use that. But Tendo Pain also one-shotted Gamabunta and the 2 other giant toad summonings with a single casual Shinra Tensei. And Gamabunta was the guy who was taking on a full-tailed beast, Shukaku, and he was doing just fine. Granted, that doesn't mean that he has as much physical durability as Shukaku, but he is still at least somewhat relative to Bijou level. And Tendo Pain just casually one-shotted 3 of these dudes. And I don't care what you say, Itachi does not have Bijou level durability, and nowhere close to that. And Tendo Pain just legit broke every bone in Gamabunta's body. So, it's not looking good for Itachi if he gets hit. And seeing as Nagato is faster than Itachi, as we already established, yeah, it's not looking good for Itachi in a physical fight. And the last thing I want to touch on is their chakra reserves. Itachi's chakra reserves are not clear at all, as the only times when we have seen him fighting is when he was sick and almost dead, so his chakra reserves were very low in that fight, and as an Edo Tensei he might have unlimited chakra, or at least much more chakra than he would have normally. Regardless, Itachi cannot compare to Nagato in this department either. Let me put this into perspective for you. Nagato, while crippled, used his 6 paths of pain to invade and battle the entire Leaf Village, destroy it with a very high scale and extremely chakra-consuming jutsu, and then he has enough chakra to battle Sage, Naruto, and the Nine Tails back to back, and he uses one of the most ridiculous high-scale jutsu in the series, Planetary Devastation, and he was still ready to take Sage Naruto on, and even after all that, Nagato had enough chakra to resurrect everyone he murdered, and only then passed away from using Rinne Rebirth. Not even chakra exhaustion, just the side effects of a jutsu. Yeah, Nagato, he is way out of Itachi's league when it comes to chakra reserves. Like, Itachi is never coming close to Nagato, no matter what in this department. Now, on to their abilities. I'll start with Genjutsu. So, we don't know how effective it would be against a Rinnegan user, but let's just give Itachi the benefit of the doubt and say that it does, because physically we already established that he doesn't stand a chance at all. So, most people would probably think that the biggest threat to Nagato will definitely be Tsukuyomi. But Nagato knows about Tsukuyomi, since Naruto was shouting about it to be in their fight in the canon timeline, and Nagato should be well aware of the danger of looking an Uchiha, especially one that specializes in high-level Genjutsu, in the eyes. Another thing that would be happening is Nagato would be summoning the animals of the animal path. And I'm curious what would happen if Itachi tried to use Genjutsu or Tsukuyomi on one of those animals. Would the Genjutsu automatically affect Nagato? After thinking about it for a bit, no, it would definitely not. We already have seen a high-level Genjutsu cast on Pain, and while the individual paths of Pain were affected, Nagato himself was not. And another thing that I would like to point out is that the Toad Genjutsu that Manpa used to trap the three paths of pain might be like the strongest Genjutsu in the series besides like Koto Matsukami and Infinite Tsukuyomi. And that's because in the data books it was stated that the Genjutsu that Manpa used was like the strongest Genjutsu in the world. So yeah. Now, the data books do have a lot of questionable claims, and they're not too reliable, but still, it's worth keeping in mind that it's at least on a similar level that Tsukuyomi would be. So, at best, the Genjutsu would only be affecting one of Nagato's vision fields, in which case it would be easy for Nagato to escape the Genjutsu by just desummoning the animal, or breaking the clearly visible Genjutsu by just doing what Naruto did in the first arc of Shippuden, just on a higher level. One strategy that I could see Nagato employing would be to summon a bunch of animals and close his eyes. That way Itachi just cannot hit him with Tsukuyomi no matter what. Or any Genjutsu for that matter, really. Something Itachi could use to counter that is trying to place all of the animals in a subtle genjutsu one by one and then make them all hallucinate something at the same time and strike Nagato in the opening that would provide. But there are some major problems with this method. Aside from one filler scene, we have never seen Itachi use genjutsu on multiple targets at once. Even Grandma Chiyo stated that one of the best ways to deal with an Uchiha is to gang up on them. This implies that an average Uchiha cannot put more than one person in a genjutsu at one time. Now, Itachi is of course way above your average Uchiha, but still it's worth taking into account. But even if Itachi can use multi-target genjutsu, the amount of skill that it would take to accurately catch a dozen targets in a genjutsu and have them see a fake image of yourself from that many angles and places would be gigantic to say the least. I'm not entirely sure how to express this in a way that everyone can understand, but imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a field. There are 10 people staring at you from 10 different places and distances and angles. Each and every single one of those people is going to see a different image. Yes, you will be imaged, but some of them will see your back, some of them will see your face, some of them will be looking at you from the side, etc. Now imagine that you yourself and all these other people are moving and fighting. That's now basically 10 different movies going on at the same time. For Itachi to be able to accurately create all of these movies while fighting and having to watch out for Nagato and all the summons would be ridiculously hard. Like, nigh impossible. So, overall, Genjutsu is a win condition for Itachi, but it's far from reliable and extremely unlikely in my eyes. Itachi's Susanoo, on the other hand, does make a pretty big difference in the battle as it gives Itachi greater protection and two very powerful abilities. The first of which is the Yara Mirror, a shield that can allegedly block anything, but this wouldn't really be much of a problem for Nagato, as the shield doesn't give him full 360-degree protection. So Nagato could easily get behind the Susanoo and just hit Itachi from the back. This would be made even easier if Nagato started spamming the animal path and just summoned all those animals into the battlefield. With their help, Nagato could attack Itachi from all sides and Itachi would have no way to counter it. The only possibility for Itachi to properly protect himself in this battle would be to make some shadow clones and have them use Susanoo, But if Itachi started using such chakra draining tactics, Nagato could just run down the clock and wait for Itachi to run out of stamina. Itachi's most useful ability in most people's eyes, the Totsuka Blade, will be nearly entirely useless against Nagato, as he can just dodge it or alternatively spam the animal path again to make distractions and make Itachi waste his time by having to seal away the animals. Nagato could easily capitalize on that opening and strike Itachi from behind. Another question is, could Nagato break through the Susanoo? And while there is no clear-cut answer, I'm inclined to believe he can since he has so much raw power. And like I said, the Tendo Pain, who is already way weaker than Nagato himself, especially a prime alive Nagato, already one-shotted 3 Bijou level creatures at the same time, and the Susanoo is most likely Bijou level durability, but it's still just Tendo Pain. Way weaker than Edo Nagato, who is weaker than Prime Nagato alive, so yeah. But even if for some reason he can't do it, there are other ways to deal with the Susanoo. The most obvious one for me being Nagato's Predapath ability to absorb ninjutsu. Actually, not just ninjutsu, but chakra in general. So Nagato should by all means be able to just absorb the Susanoo and maybe even the Totsuka Blade, since it's a jutsu and it's made out of chakra. Even if we say that it can't and give Itachi the benefit of the doubt again, all Nagato needs to do is wait. Itachi, even a prime Itachi, can't hold his Susanoo forever. And Nagato has ridiculous chakra reserves, we already established that. The Amaterasu is also a non-factor in this fight, as Nagato can just absorb it or push it away using Shinra Tensei. He should, by all means, also be able to just dodge it, as the Raikage did against Sasuke. We already established that Nagato is much faster than the Raikage, who actually dodged the Amaterasu, so that should also be a very likely possibility. Izanami probably won't be effective either, as Itachi would have to create a loop for it to work, and I just don't see him doing that with Nagato, who is both faster and stronger and more versatile than him. In my opinion, the one and only ability that could bring Itachi the definitive win is Izanagi. If he used it to sneak up on Nagato from behind when he was off guard and stab him with the Totsuka Blade, then he wins. But again, there are factors to take into consideration. First, Itachi would have to die, but that won't be too hard when fighting Nagato. Second, Itachi might die without being able to set up an Izanagi, though due to his fast reaction speeds, I don't think that would be too much of an issue unless he gets caught off guard by something that Nagato can do. And another thing is, it's interesting, Suikage and Seth the Programmer also talked about this as well, but, could Izanagi just bypass the soul absorption from the human path? It's a really weird interaction because your soul is literally ripped out of your body, so I don't know how that would work out, but let's just say that he can and that he does. The more important question then becomes, how exactly does Izanagi work? The user of it can resurrect himself, yes, but the most important thing here is time. And here we have two conflicting pieces of evidence. Madara was able to set a time for when he would resurrect, but Danzo always just came back to life immediately after dying. If Itachi just comes back to life immediately, then Nagato would still be on guard, and he might still have animals on the battlefield that cover his blind spots. So if Itachi was to suddenly appear behind him, Nagato, with his crazy reaction speeds, would be able to get out of the way of the attack and just block it with Shinra Tensei or a summoning or something, or absorb the Totsuka Blade or anything really. Then Itachi would have to continue the fight with only one eye and would eventually lose again, and this time the element of surprise will not be on his side to use another Izanagi and he would fail and die. However, If Itachi can set a timer to maybe 5 minutes after the fight, so Nagato has calmed down and is presumably off guard, and has presumably desummoned all the animals, then I guess Itachi wins? It's not clear how that would go down, but I will say that Itachi does have a very high chance of succeeding then. Then again, if Danzo could set a timer, I think he would have done so. Wouldn't that have helped him to survive and escape? And what if Nagato moves away from the battlefield in those 5 minutes? Then Itachi would have to chase him down, but in that case, he would most likely lose the element of surprise, which is literally the only thing that can win him the fight. And also, the Susanoo might take too long to activate, even if the conditions are perfect. Let's say that Itachi dies and then appears behind Nagato. Would he be able to manifest the Totsuka Blade before Nagato can react with his insane reaction time? No other attack that Itachi can pull out would be strong enough to kill Nagato. He has to use the Totsuka Blade. But since Nagato has shown to be able to react to various blindside attacks, would this even be an issue for him? One thing, yes, Itachi did catch Nagato by surprise twice when they were fighting in the canon timeline, but you have to take some things into consideration. The first time that Itachi caught Nagato off guard, he had blinded all of Nagato's summons, and Kabuto was controlling Nagato, so Itachi actually caught Kabuto by surprise, not Nagato. And you might be wondering, what's the difference? Well, the difference is that Nagato has way better control and knowledge of his own body and abilities. Do you really think that Nagato wouldn't notice all of his fields of vision going dark one by one? And Kabuto openly wondered what else Nagato could do before remembering Shinra Tensei, so he clearly doesn't have complete mastery over the Rinnegan like Nagato would. And third, Nagato was occupied with two high Kage level opponents when Itachi attacked him. He couldn't move much, if at all, in that situation. And while Itachi did catch Nagato with the Totsuka Blade at the end of that fight, that was mostly plot-induced stupidity. Nagato reacted to and countered all of KCM Naruto's and Killer Bee's attacks with ease, but just stood there and let the Totsuka Blade impale him from the front. Kabuto just let his guard down completely, and I really don't see that happening with the actual Nagato. You might think that this is like a poor excuse, or I'm just like making an excuse because I want Nagato to win or something like that. But like really, it just doesn't match what has been shown in the actual series. Like, it's so dumb. It's like in the end of the Dragon Ball movie, like the first Broly movie, where just suddenly like Goku and all the other characters struggle with like Broly, but then Goku gets the energy of base Vegeta and just one-shots Broly. Like that's like that level of stupidity. It's really just impossible. It's impossible to happen in a real fight scenario. So overall, the Izanagi thing is really confusing and complicated, and I'll leave this up to you. If you think it would work, sure, it might. If you think it wouldn't, sure, go ahead. Now for the big elephant in the room. The moment Nagato pulls out Chibaku Tensei, Itachi has to use Izanagi or he is done for. Realize that knowing how to counter an ability and actually being able to counter said ability are two very different things. Itachi does not have enough power to destroy Chibaku Tensei, plain and simple. If he did, he wouldn't have asked Naruto and Killer Bee for help. All three of them were necessary to best Chibaku Tensei, so Itachi alone would stand no chance of doing that. Like I said, he has to use Izanagi, and we already covered that. If Itachi seals Nagato, then he wins, but if Nagato dodges or blocks, then the fight resumes, only this time Itachi is weaker and he will die faster than before, yada yada yada. We already covered that. But overall, physicality-wise, Nagato just completely outclasses Itachi in almost every single way. Durability, stamina, and raw power are definitively in Nagato's favor. Speed is a little more contentious, but I will also grant this category to Nagato. And Nagato's arsenal is just too overwhelming for Itachi, and most characters in the series to handle. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that Nagato can shoot missiles and create limbs and faces for himself with the Asura Path. He can also fly using telekinesis. And he can also use Bansho Tenin and pull Itachi into his grasp and just suck his soul out. Nagato could summon the Geromazo, and while Itachi could absorb it with the Totsuka blade, the opening that would provide for Nagato to strike would be huge. And in the time that it takes to seal away something as massive as the Geromazo, Nagato could kill Itachi 3 times over. Nagato just has so many ways to overwhelm and kill Itachi, and so many OP abilities, and there's really only 1 or 2 sketchy scenarios when I could see Itachi pulling out a win. And honestly, just imagine this. With everything that Nagato can do, he could literally just fly into the air and start shooting missiles and laser beams and Shinra Tenseis and Bansho Tenins and all of this, OP jutsu at Nagato from the sky, where Itachi can't even reach him, no matter what he does. Literally, what would Itachi do? Nagato just flies into the sky, starts shooting missiles. Itachi has to just keep dodging him or block him or something like that. But then, Nagato could probably use 2 Rinnegan Jutsu at once. It's no stretch to say that he can. I mean, he used the Asura Path and the Human Path and the Preda Path at the same time when he fought Killer Bee and Naruto. So it's no stretch that he could use 2 Jutsu at once. So in that case, he could use Bansho Tenin or his telekinesis to hold Itachi in place or pull him closer to the place where Itachi would use his other ability, the Asura Path, to shoot missiles at that place, right? So Nagato just holds Itachi in place, shoots missiles and laser beams at Itachi. Itachi is forced to use the Susanoo to block it, and just runs out of chakra eventually. How is Itachi going to counter that? You genuinely have to come up with a counter to something like that. Now, the only thing that you might be able to argue is that Nagato doesn't actually fight that way, but it's still something that could, in theory, happen. If Nagato sees that all else is failing and Itachi is just his defense is just too powerful, and he's fast or something, he can barely keep up and he's having a hard time. Do you really think that he wouldn't just think of something like that and then fly into the air and then just attack him? I'm pretty sure that Nagato is smart enough to figure something like that out. And I don't think the fight would be easy, no. But I do believe that Nagato wins 8 times out of 10. Maybe even 9 times if we give him more of the benefit of the doubt. But this has been it for me today. If you have anything to add to the discussion, please do so in the comments below, and goodbye.